Hey guys, I wanted to make this video around the anniversary of 9/11, although that sounds weird. Should be more like the slammiversary of 9/11 because of what happened to those twin towers. And it's essentially about, well, I don't want to say how to distinguish fake news from real news because I'm certainly no authority, but I would say as to how to distinguish how you know something is real news and something that should be worth being paid attention to. This stems from a conversation that I had in the beginning of June when I met my best friend's mom for the first time. And she's a real cool lady. She used to be a nurse and then she retired and she would stay home and watch TV a lot. And she, had noticed some patterns in TV, like in TV and news and reporting and so on and so forth. One of those things would have to do with 9/11, but I also wanted to show this picture. This picture is kind of a staple, or has been a staple in some of my other videos, because I just find it so haunting. It was actually taken in 1977 of a homeless guy, presumably a Vietnam vet. I mean, that's what I want to say he is, taking a nap on a cot outside his car right underneath the Twin Towers. Well, not right underneath them, but very close. And it's just so haunting and arresting to me. Although it's weird, it looks different than even the last time I saw it, because the last time I looked at it, I remember more stuff being over here, but it's not. It's just so vacant and barren. It's weird, it's creepy, it's almost haunting with those low-hanging clouds and just how, I think just the angle of the lens, the buildings look kind of like they're already tipping anyway. It's just so very strange. But this video kind of encompasses a conversation. Well, it doesn't kind of, it does encompass a conversation that I had with my best friend's mom when she was visiting for my best friend's son's high school graduation. The first sort of news story that we know is true, or that would be purportedly true, would involve President Harry Truman and something that he had written after the JFK assassination. And he called for CIA abolition. And that story, I think it was in the Washington Post, was swiftly retracted. And it's a pretty interesting story, but my best friend's mom remembered this story, and I just want to go ahead and recount it for you as best I can. So the author writes, "For some time I've been disturbed by the way the CIA has been diverted from its original assignment," wrote former President Harry Truman of the Washington Post on December 22nd, 1963. It was exactly 1 month after the assassination of President Kennedy. It has become an operational and at times policy-making arm of the government. This has led to trouble and may have compounded our difficulties in several explosive areas," Truman wrote. The former president never explicitly linked JFK's death to the clandestine service, but the timing and venue of this piece was suggestive. And then it goes on to say, with a heading, "Why Truman Spoke." Already Soviet bloc news outlets were speculating Kennedy's murder, and the murder of the only suspect while in police custody pointed to U.S. government involvement in the assassination. Truman addressed the allegations obliquely. "This quiet intelligence arm of the president has been so removed from its intended role that it is being interpreted as a symbol of sinister and mysterious foreign intrigue and subject for Cold War enemy propaganda," Truman wrote. Truman said he knew the first two directors of the CIA and called them men of highest character, patriotism, and integrity. He added he could only assume the same about all those who continue in charge. But he had stiff words for the agency's leader. He said the CIA's operational duties should be terminated. In short, JFK's assassination prompted Truman to call for the CIA's abolition. There can be little doubt that the circumstances of Kennedy's murder prompted Truman's radical proposal. The former president, living in Missouri, began writing his Post article about his Post article, Washington Post that is, article 9 days after Kennedy was killed, according to an excellent 2009 piece by former CIA officer Ray McGovern, who says he was relying on JFK researcher Ray Marcus. In handwritten notes found at the Truman Library, the former president noted, among other things, that the CIA had worked as he intended only when I had control, quote unquote. 4 months later, the CIA director Allen Dulles paid Truman a visit. Dulles tried to get Truman to retract what he had written in the Post. No dice, said Truman, according to McGovern Marcus. But 4 days later, in a formal memo for Lawrence Houston, the CIA's general counsel, Dulles fabricated a retraction. He claimed that Truman had told him the Washington Post article was all wrong and that Truman seemed quite astounded by it. Truman denied it. In a June 10, 1964 letter to Look magazine, Truman restated the critique of covert action, emphasizing that he never intended the CIA to get involved in strange activities. As the country grieved JFK's death and suspicions of conspiracy mounted, many current and former U.S. officials publicly rallied around the official story that Oswald had killed JFK alone and unaided. But privately, many people familiar with the workings of the CIA had their doubts. Truman's article was one of the earliest expressions of those doubts. Others would follow. So that was a swift retraction. And then, of course, my friend's mom went on to talk about seeing Jack Ruby kill Lee Harvey Oswald on TV. And this is another weird one for me, too, because I could swear that the Mandela effect about Jack Ruby killing Lee Harvey Oswald was that it never happened, and that now that had been sort of wiped from our history. But then you can't really prove a negative either, so I guess maybe I misremembered it, or I left that in another reality, because that's what I remember. Now they're just saying that the angle's wrong or different. Or I should say that the angle that the assassination was filmed on is different. And that even just seems suspect to me, because it's just like, nobody would have stopped Jack Ruby. It almost seems like a staged event. You think? It's like they're trying to tell the assassins of the assassins of the assassins not to tweet like a bird or not to blab, you know. It was just all so strange. But then again, so many things on TV do seem staged, as we well know. So the second thing that we talked about was the abnormality causing power outage. In February of 2013, it was a Super Bowl, and nobody said anything about it. It was just weird. I can't do this on paper. It was just one of those things where she talked about at the 2013 Super Bowl, the power just went out. And they came back online once the power came back online, and nobody said anything about it. Nobody gave any reasons for it. They barely talked about it, and the game went on. And probably about a week to a few days after we had the discussion, I started looking that up online too, along with the Truman article. And what I found was that even in those articles, there was no mention. And again, this would have been in June of this year. There was still no mention of what caused it in the ones that came up on Google. And I was like, wow, like they're talking about it, but they don't have a reason. And then when I went to research it again before making this video, like probably a month or two ago, all I came up with was articles with reasons for why the power outage happened. It's almost as if they knew like I was talking about it and I was going to make a video about it. But it was just so strange. And again, it's one of those things where you can't prove a negative, but I could not find any reason the power went out. And now they're saying it's just something really, really mundane, like a broken transformer or something like that. Or it's a Mandela effect memory for her, because she seems to remember it not at all as having had any reason, and very, very ambiguous. So that was really strange too. And then her biggest memory was, and this is why I'm showing a picture of the Twin Towers, and the one that I find most arresting, is her memory of watching the news. This probably would have been in September of 2001. I don't know how many days before 9/11. It was either the day before 9/11 or about a week before 9/11. She said she was watching the news, and she would watch it, it was just on repeat. It was like how they would have those morning news shows, and then every half hour or hour they would repeat the same top stories. So she said at 7 a.m. they talked about a pilot at the school, and I'm blanking on where the alleged terrorist studied, but she talked about a pilot only wanting to learn how to land. In other words, that's what they reported on the news. They just reported it was like a random story connected to nothing. Again, this is before 9/11. They reported on a pilot studying at a flight school only wanting to learn how to land. And then she said the next hour she expected it to come on again because it was the 8 o'clock hour. And again, they would do these stories in a continuous loop for, I don't know, I guess the whole morning. And she said they retracted it, or they didn't even retract it. They just didn't mention it again. And this also reminds me of Fukushima, because it was just like for about maybe a week or 2 days, but I think it was a week, they mentioned Fukushima. They mentioned that there was an earthquake and that the nuclear reactor was in jeopardy. And then they just stopped talking about it. And that's when I got nervous, because when they stop talking about it, it's got to be 1,000 times worse than what it is. And then I also remember too, and this was arresting, although this happened more recently. Elijah Wood did an interview, and he was talking all about pedophilia and sexual molestation in Hollywood. I mean, not as graphically or in-depth as a lot of conspiracy theory channels do it, but he was talking about it. And then the next day they had him retracted. And it was so funny because I made a comment or a status update about it on Facebook, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a little suspect. And then I had one of these friends, and they're one of these friends, like, I used to be close with them in high school, but now it just seems like every time they want to comment on something on my Facebook, it's just to be contrarian or to be sort of argumentative. And they were like, oh no, yeah, I mean, articles, journalists get quotes wrong all the time. So, he probably just didn't mean to say it or make it sound so scandalous as it was. And then all of us kind of jumped on her. We were like, oh yeah, because pedophilia only happens in the church. It doesn't happen in Hollywood. Wink, wink, nod, nod. So those are just examples. It's like if you hear about a story and then all of a sudden they either retract it real fast or they stop talking about it, that's when something's probably really, really valid to it. And another thing that was really, really interesting about 9/11, I know I'm jumping back to 9/11, is that I have a friend whose father worked on Men in Black 2. And she said that they had to rewrite the entire ending because Men in Black 2 was set to come out around or after the time that 9/11 occurred. And the end of the film involved the alien spaceships dissolving both buildings, which is really, really creepy. But that said, I have this flag that I made. I made this necklace, like I painted it like right after 9/11. And so obviously I got my reality residue right. I got the American flag right. I painted all 50 stars. But this is funny because I got these patriotic socks. I don't know. I don't consider myself like a hardcore patriot or anything like that. But I do love like holiday themed things. And I think I got this before Memorial Day or 4th of July. And it was a 3-pack of patriotic socks. So I'm like, what the heck? I need socks. I need a good sock. These are thick. But look at this. I mean, they're abbreviated American flags, but they've got red right underneath the blue square. So that's pretty funny. But this picture just haunts me. I don't know. And I just, like, after 9/11 happened, I was just starting to get into conspiracy theories in the early 2000s. But I just remember hearing that one of the buildings fell. And then when I saw that it had fallen, I'm like, this thing turned to dust. That is just crazy. And I remember I was actually in New York 2 days before 9/11, and everything was just so beautiful and so clean and so amazing. But the weird thing was, the really weird thing was that probably in about 1996, and I was living in Los Angeles then, I had this dream that I was in New York for no apparent reason, no good reason, and I was sitting sort of on the side of this freeway that, I guess it's where you drive from New England, where you drive if you're driving from New England into New York. I can't remember which freeway it is. But I was sitting there and I saw these two big tall buildings, just two twin towers. And my head was sort of poking up through the grass. In other words, my eyes were somewhat obscured. And all I remember doing is looking at those two towers, my hair flowing in the breeze and thinking, will they fall? And that was in 1996. And I even drew it in my journal. Like, I drew a picture of the dream in my journal. The dream made such an impression on me. And I cannot find that journal. I can't find any of my journals from the mid-90s. I can find them from the early 90s and the early 2000s. But between the mid to late 90s, I can't find anything. But even then, it's like you go back, and I've listened to Art Bell, like Coast to Coast. And even he says that on the day that the 9/11 explosion happened, he was saying, this is clearly the product of an explosion. I'm trying to do my Art Bell voice. This is clearly the product of an explosion. Everything has turned to dust and da-da-da-da-da. And then, of course, years later, it was found out that he was not, or he revealed himself to be not a 9/11 conspiracy theorist. Unless that's changed and that's not... that's not what he said anymore. But in light of that, and because it's Halloween, I thought, in addition to this that I made, I thought that I would just like display some of my other necklaces. I don't really make them anymore, but I just like painting them, so I paint them. And I used to do a lot of Halloween stuff, so I figured I better get this out before Halloween, because why not, right? I should show everyone before Halloween. I'm not trying to sell these. I mean, it's just like, it's a fun little tradition, and I wear them around my own neck for Halloween. And then this is like my signature. This is like my signature design. I call it the Halloween yin yang, although I've made better ones than this. But so it's a yin yang with like spooky faces on it and a ghost and a moon on either side. And then I love my jack-o'-lantern faces, and I did like, for a time I was doing jack-o'-lanterns in found places. This right here, up there. That's my Matterhorns, and then that's my water wheel in my cabin in the woods, and my Valentine's Day themed ones, and my, it's like a Japanese bridge and trees. Anyway, this is not an advertisement for my necklaces, but they're just so fun when I made them. I just don't really have time to do them anymore is the problem, so it's kind of a bummer. But anyway, it's my most Halloween-y video. Because I got all my jack-o'-lantern necklaces that I never sold, although they were the most popular ones. Alright, that's about it, you guys. Peace out.